Welcome to another episode of the Holistic Fat Loss and Fitness Podcast. Every session is about helping our clients and members live better, longer, with real life scenarios. The theme that we've been running with for a little bit is inflammation, because it's had a lot of questions from a lot of people who just wanted to understand more about it, really. It's a bit of a elusive topic. It gets talked about a lot with like detox and stress and things like nervous system. I don't think they're very well understood, which would be nice for people to get a better understanding of them, considering how much of what I consider good health they're involved in. Giving people that baseline foundation really helps. So my question to you, starting, Jeffrey, is what's the first thing that comes to mind for you when you think inflammation and the gut or gut health?
From my perspective, because of the work I do in mental health, I immediately think of the growing amount of research linking inflammation and dysbiosis in your gut to things like depression and anxiety.
Whoa.
It's kind of front of mind at the moment, and looking at improving gut health so you can improve your mental health.
It's right topic of mind at the moment, isn't it? Really starting to be for the better, I believe. A really growing research into how prevalent it is. Great thought process. And Vince, yourself?
I'm a little bit more basic than Jeffrey. I guess for inflammation for me, irritation and leading to repair. Essentially, that's my two basic things of inflammation.
I love it. And you actually, with the inspiration for today's topic, Vince, because you sent through a question. I know you're going through a bit of a protocol at the moment, which is awesome. And you wanted to sort of get a bit more clarity around the role that inflammation and gut health play in overall results. Was it something like that?
It was. I actually had a bit of a discussion with Anth about it because it was amazing to me how you get the gut health right, that everything else seems to achieve much better goals much more efficiently. So yeah, I guess that was my thoughts behind the questions I had for you.
Yeah, I like it. And I want to give again some more educational context into sort of inflammation and its role in the gut. And I think it's a bit misunderstood, but in fairness to people, it's pretty complicated and it's only just starting to come into the forefront, I think. So let's have a little discussion around that. I want to talk about sort of the gut inflammation loop and kind of how it works to kick us off. I want you to think your gut lining is only sort of one cell thick. It's supposed to be protected by really tight junctions. Like they're supposed to be really packed in together. Think like a zipper, right? And it's supposed to allow nutrients through, but block sort of larger particles that we don't want through, simply put. But when your inflammation is high from stress, sleep, or poor sleep, alcohol's a good one, processed food, antibiotics, it actually increases something called zonulin, which is a protein. And what zonulin can do is it can sort of unzip these junctions together, which isn't ideal. When you get these tight junctions now that have been unzipped and they're a little further apart, you get something that can result in leaky gut. And I think a few people have heard sort of that phrase before. And one of the things you don't want from leaky gut is you can get certain toxins, and there are a few, but one of them is LPS, undigested food particles, and bacteria can all leak into your bloodstream. That's not ideal. And that causes an inflammatory stress response in the body. Simply put, I think it's kind of like, think of your gut like a coffee filter, I guess. And if you're actually, you've got your coffee grounds and they're sort of, I guess, your toxins. If you've actually used one and you've actually torn the filter, you get coffee in your actual coffee, which is not what you want, or the coffee grounds, I should say. And it kind of ruins most people's coffee. That is kind of the same thing that happens with your gut, where the particles that you don't want are now in your bloodstream. And this actually sends your body, especially your immune system, into overdrive. And now we've got a huge immune response, stress response, and inflammatory response occurring systemically around the body. So that's one of the pathways in which, just one of the specific pathways in which a healthy gut, or in this case, a gut that's not as healthy, can really affect the rest of the body. Because in previous podcasts and previous discussions, we would have discussed, now we've got high stress in the body. Now we've got a increased HPA axis, which is now in overdrive due to that stress response. We've now got a overactive inflammation or immune system response causing systemic inflammation in the body. And now on the back of this, we'll get hormonal dysregulation, we'll get nervous system dysregulation. And if we're talking up and down regulating certain pathways in the body, we'll get a lot of the pathways that we don't want to be active, like breaking down muscle and storing fat. And a lot of the ones that we do want active, suppressed, like burning fat and building muscle. And this happens in the gut as much as it happens anywhere else. So I want to talk about sort of that triggering of systemic inflammation. So let's just take leaky gut as the example of gut health. When you get these toxins into your bloodstream, they bind to certain receptors on your immune cells, and they actually activate pathways to do with inflammation. They'll activate a certain pathway, and that triggers inflammation. So, and it sets a whole bunch of a cascade into the body now that we're on the back of this. So I want you to think there's a couple of key ones that I really want people to know about. And one of them is interleukin-6. This is a key inflammatory messenger that impacts mood and blood sugar and muscle repair. There's one called TNF-a, which I believe stands for tumor necrosis factor alpha. What this actually does is it drives chronic pain and fat gain. And you've got another one of the interleukins, I believe it's like a 1B, I think, which this is where you kind of get your increase in fever, fatigue, and you'll get some sort of immune dysregulation. So when you've got this response happening, which most people wouldn't know about, I want you to think it's more like your body's just setting off, I guess, smoke alarms in every room, even when there's no fire. And this is what happens when you've got a gut that's completely out of whack, to be honest. And when this happens, it drains your energy, it drains your mental clarity, and drains performance. Because we talked before on a previous podcast where it's if you've got your theoretical 100% that your body can give, any extra percentage that's getting taken up by stress and inflammation and like, an immune response and repairing your gut just takes away from the percentage that it has to do other things that you'd like. And when it is getting to a threshold where it's overburdened, it will just get rid of tasks that you want it to prioritize, but it perceives as a luxury, like maintaining a high metabolism, burning fat, especially stubborn, unwanted fat around your midsection, and building muscle or, improving strength gains and things like that. They are amazing luxuries for the body, but not essential. So this is kind of the deep physiology that I'm thinking about when I'm assessing and coaching somebody. Not that I convey a lot of this to the people that I'm coaching, because I think most of it goes over their head and it's probably a bit deeper than what they need to make change. But Vince, this is one of the reasons that if we can fix big things like stress cascades, HPA dysfunction, gut dysbiosis, which means, microbiome being out of whack, and systemic inflammation, the body will actually kind of self-heal due to the balance that you restore back in. Because for most people, it's at some form of metabolic chaos just due to the systemic inflammation and stress that it's under. So we'll briefly touch on it because we talked about it in the last podcast, but I want to talk about inflammation and how it disrupts your fat loss. So it blocks signaling, which is very unfortunate, which is essential for things like insulin sensitivity. So what's the, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. What's the result of this? It just means your cells can't use insulin or glucose, very effectively. Like the result of that is you store more fat, especially around your belly. And the fat cells in your stomach and around your torso are more sensitive to cortisol. They have more receptors. They get more when you become more insulin resistant and when you've got high stress. So this means cortisol remains high and it tells your body to store onto that fat just in case you need it from a survival point of view. It doesn't know that we're just in day-to-day living. It kind of perceives it as one in the same. It has a big effect on leptin, which is your satiety hormone. It becomes less effective, is probably the best way. What does that actually mean? It just means more cravings, less satisfaction after meals, and it normally means eating again sooner, which is not ideal. So when this is happening, your body just thinks it's in a bit of a crisis or a perceived crisis. It's all one and the same for it. So instead of burning fat, it clings to it. And this often makes things worse. We talk a lot about how inflammation blocks muscle recovery. So when your gut is out of whack and we've just hit that toxins in the bloodstream, high cortisol on the back of it, your nervous system's now being agitated and your sympathetic nervous system's been elevated, hormones are being disrupted, and inflammation has ensued because of that. You're going to get inflammation blocked muscle recovery. So we've spoken about this in a previous podcast, but to build muscle, your body needs to activate mTOR. It's a key signal for protein synthesis. Inflammation suppresses this signal. So it just slows growth and repair, which is unfortunate. It also damages your mitochondria. And for those who don't know, your mitochondria are the energy engines of the body, or factories, if you want to call them that. And it actually, inflammation reduces ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, which is a key energy molecule in the body. And it reduces that production, which means slower recovery, less strength, more fatigue is probably the best way to put that. So over time, you actually get a thing called anabolic resistance, which really just is a fancy way of saying your body stops responding as well to training. Again, kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back a lot of the time. Now, we get this a lot, like, how does inflammation affect my pains and aches, really? Well, it stiffens your joints and your fascia. So through your gut being in dysbiosis and inflamed, you get a chronic inflammatory response, and that then increases muscle tone and nervous system tension. What does that mean? You get tight muscles and it reduces your mobility, which is not ideal. So often if I see somebody who's chronically tight, even if they're doing some of the right things, often injured and fatigued, I generally put it down to some level of systemic inflammation. And yes, they could get physio and chiro and myo and get treatment, but because the body's so inflamed, their likelihood of re-injuring or having something else niggle at them is quite high. But if you reduce systemic stress and inflammation as a team, you'll find that they get far less injuries in the first place because you've gotten to one of the root causes as to why there's so much tightness in the muscles. It also affects 2 other things when it comes to sort of joint stiffness, pain, tightness. It affects your collagen turnover, high inflammation, and the hydration of your fascia. And that, I guess that makes your muscles, it would feel stickier, drier, and less elastic is probably the best way to put that. So inflammation can trigger all sorts of soft tissue injuries and niggles. Any thoughts and feelings around what we've tackled in the first portion of today? I'll just open the floor to anybody that wants to get involved.
I was going to ask you about how reducing systemic inflammation through kind of poor diet and lifestyle, changing your diet lifestyle to reduce systemic inflammation, the impact that has on recovery from training. But I think what you said is it frees your body up to do those luxurious things like muscle growth and recovering from a workout. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, it definitely does that. Like, it just allows your body to do the process that you actually want it to and not be hindered by spending more time doing something that it doesn't. It's not quite a 1-for-1 switch. You get a lot more benefit than that because when your body's actually not fighting inflammation, you increase things like amino acid uptake into the muscles. You'll be more glucose sensitive, which means not only will you get more nutrients into the muscles to recover faster, you'll also not have it working against you in terms of increasing muscle tone and reducing like fascia hydration, which is working against you. So you get a double positive by reducing your inflammation to actually help with your recovery. So like there's kind of 3 sort of things that I'm trying to tackle with the gut when it comes to reducing inflammation. And I think about this a lot. Some of them are more complicated than others, but I'll briefly touch on them because this is an entire episode in itself so that people can understand sort of gut biology. I think most people just think of the digestive tract as just like a tube for food, I guess, but it definitely is that, but it does a hell of a lot more than that, which I think it's starting to come on the forefront. We're just talking about some research involved, Jeffrey, just about the wider impacts of overall gut health. But when we're assessing, there's kind of a couple of things that we can see when we see inflammation in the gut. And first of all, you've got your lining, and people just think of it as a solid tube, but it's far from that. You've got this thing called microvilli, which are kind of like little fingers in the tube, which is why you've got so much surface area in your gut. And then on those fingers, you've got fingers again. So it just ends up being a really big, like a brush surface around the tube. to increase surface area and get them to single cells to be able to get the actual nutrient diffusion and absorption through that portion of the body. What you want to do is have them as big, long fingers that are going into your gut tube so they can catch all the food particles. But through systemic inflammation and stress, you can actually wither those down so that they're more like stumps rather than big fingers waving into your gut tube, if that makes sense. This obviously reduces the amount of surface area, which is going to severely hinder absorption of things. And that's a big issue that we look at when we look at, doing a full gut protocol, but looking at somebody's GI tract. The other one is in on the microvilli, there's actually a mucus layer that should be in there. And you want that to be two things. You want it to be the right viscosity, which gets hampered by inflammation, and you want it to be the right thickness. Too thick, your nutrients can't get through and they don't get absorbed anyway. Too thin, you invite things like bacteria and pathogens to be too close to your cells and go into your bloodstream, neither of which your body wants. Then you've got the tight junctions, which you talked about before. Your cells should be packed nice and tight together where things can't get in between them. But through inflammation and through a substance called zonulin, you can unzip those and widen the gap. And because of that, you now have more access, or the outside world has more access to the inside world of you, which is not what your body wants either. Through that whole thing, there's actually neurons and nervous system attachments straight to your gut. So it's actually directly feeding you and your brain and your body direct feedback purely because it interacts with the outside world. And it's one of the only places inside your body that does. So it's packed with these things. And when there's inflammation in there, it gets straight sent to your body into your nervous system to then drive an inflammation response accordingly, or a stress response, normally both, which then starts that cascade that we often talk about. So I want to talk about, mainly from a nutritional standpoint, what we can do to get in front of these. And I'm fully aware I haven't delved deep into any gut microbiome today, which is clearly a big factor in gut health. But it's a deep topic and I want to do it the justice that it deserves. So it deserves an entire podcast or podcast series on its own so that people can get a good understanding as to what it is, the differences, the different microbiome species that are in there and what they could be, and then relate them back to things that we talked about previously, Jeffrey, which is mental health is definitely one of them, but optimal health, longevity, there's a bunch of stuff that they're related to. So I'll give them the justice they deserve at another time. But on the actual gut lining and the inflammation in the gut, there's a couple of things that I would love people to get rid of immediately that have proved to be gut irritants and inflammation driving. And we'll go through a quick one. We've got gluten, mainly from wheat. It really triggers gut permeability and immune responses, even in non-celiacs. Industrial seed oils, they inflame the gut and imbalance your microbiome. Refined sugars and processed snacks, often filled with industrial seed oils, they often feed the bacteria you don't want, increase leaky gut and spike cravings. Excess alcohol, don't think there's any surprise there, destroys gut lining cells. It lowers and kills off good bacteria and just all around in general raises different toxins in your bloodstream. And conventional dairy actually has been proven to be a pretty big irritant for most people's guts. So I want to quickly dive into these. Why gluten and what does it do? Well, it increases zonulin, which we've spoken about. So gluten, particularly gliadin, it triggers the release of your zonulin, and that's the protein between your cells, and it acts as a zipper and it opens up your cells in your gut lining. Again, it just increases intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut. It allows that food, bacteria, particles, toxins to pass into your bloodstream, which is not ideal. And then we've got industrial seed oils. What is it about them that is so inflammatory? Well, they're really high in omega-6, and these oils are the problem with that is they're often just unstable and prone to oxidation, especially when they're heated. So what are they commonly found in? It's like a lot of dressings. You're looking for linoleic acid will be the main one, but canola's terrible for it. It's in takeaway chips. It's in a lot of protein bars. It's in a lot of nut butters. It's definitely in most mayos that you'll find. And even your healthy snacks will have that in there. So it's a really big gut inflammatory causer. Triggers that immune response, especially because rancid oils, they trigger certain receptors in immune cells and then produce a inflammatory protein release. and they have a big, big, big effect on microbiome disruption. We've got things like refined sugar and processed snacks. Again, I don't think this is going to be mind blowing for anybody. There's a couple of things that are in them, but mainly it is the maltodextrin that's in them isn't very good, but they're often attached to vegetable oils and they often will have gluten in there as well. And they'll often have quote unquote like sugar alcohols that don't do your gut any service either.
What about things like chili, like traditional, natural irritants? Do they have the same sort of issues?
Chili works actually on works differently, I should say, because you actually have it works on your pain receptors. And a part of that obviously means you can grow a threshold, is the word I'm looking for, in that. So, but when you do stimulate that pain receptor for that first time, you will get an inflammatory response from it. But there is actually studies with, I believe it's capsaicin, apologies if I got that wrong, which has actually been shown to reduce pro-inflammatory proteins, I should say, or cytokines, and actually helps people. They actually help support blood flow, chili as well. But they're a little different than genuine inflammatory foods or foods that cause an inflammatory response in the body. The inflammatory response I'm genuinely after is a immune-based
GI.
inflammatory response. Yeah. So if it is an immune response, that is more of an irritant to me or a digestive inflammatory marker comparatively to just potentially an irritant, which is slightly different.
Because I'm terrible with chili. My dad just heaps the stuff on. I get like digestive issues and like sore stomach and all that sort of stuff. It kind of rips through me.
Mm-hmm.
So I avoid chili. But yeah, if it doesn't make a difference, if it's something I should have, Sam, maybe I should consider like slowly building up a resistance.
No, you don't need chili in your life to be of optimal health. There are a few things that I'd put in well before chili. Let's have a look into those. So, like things that I would prioritize. Like we've talked in terms of inflammation, right? I'll keep this mainly to foods, but we've talked about like sleep is your best friend, good sleep hygiene, good sleep quality. Almost nothing beats that for reducing inflammation in the body in terms of any recovery tool, right? And maybe we should deep dive into a full sleep segment because it's just so vitally important. And everyone tells me that they know about it and everyone tells me that they sleep okay, but barely anybody I know has what I would call optimal quality sleep based on the metrics of a wearable that's actually telling them that. So that's a definite good place to start and where most people can get improvement. We've talked about adding in recovery-based things into your week, saunas, cold tubs, yoga, meditation, stretching. Again, they'll do immeasurable benefit for reducing systemic inflammation via reducing your cortisol pathways and your HPA overdrive, which is unbelievably important. Then we talk about training methods and how they can have a positive effect or a negative effect on overall stress and inflammation in the body. Those three I would talk about with every person because they clearly have a massive effect on inflammation in the gut. But I want to keep it more tangible today and talk about nutritional choices that I would have or supplementation that would have a good benefit as well. So it is you fix your gut and you kind of fix the overall system almost. It's hard because the caveat is it's hard to have an optimal healthy gut with, if we went as deep as saying like the right microbiome balance without having a good functioning body for every other system. It's a very difficult process because the gut is so finicky and it gets so inflamed so quickly and it's on the forefront of good or bad health in the body that if it's not optimal, there's probably a whole bunch of lifestyle habits and systems that aren't optimal at the same time. So by proxy, you could almost just focus on the gut and you would get most of the other health markers you want to be in the space that you would want them in. For nutrition, though, really simple. You want to eat cooked, colorful veg. Cooked is a lot easier than raw, a lot gentler on digestion, rich in antioxidants, helps repair the gut. You've got polyphenol-rich foods. They reduce inflammation, protect the gut barrier, feed you good microbes. You've got prebiotic foods, prebiotic fibers. What they do, they feed beneficial bacteria in your gut. Omega-3 rich fats. I think everybody knows them. They're unbelievable for you. They're almost a cheat code for health. Just throw them in and you'll probably get the right answer. What they do is they lower gut inflammation in this instance and they support immune tolerance. Bone broths and collagens provide a really great source of amino acids like glutamine, which rebuild your gut wall. You've got extras that you can have like aloe vera, slippery elm, marshmallow root. What they do is they soothe and protect the gut lining. It's kind of like a balm for your gut or belly, I imagine. And then you've got some mineral rich foods, and they're going to support digestion, enzyme activity, gut lining integrity. And then you've got something that a lot of people, some have, some don't, but you've got bitters and apple cider vinegar. What they do is they boost stomach acid and digestive enzymes to break your food down better. That's my list of things that I would take, and you could take them daily that are going to help support overall decreasing your inflammation and rebuilding your gut health all at the same time. Let's dive into them for a second. So, cooked colored vegetables. Don't think they're kind of pretty self-explanatory. Carrots, pumpkins, zucchini, sweet potato, beetroot, you name them, cook them. What it does, it just breaks down some of the tougher fibers, especially if you've already got gut inflammation. It's like we just want to be as gentle on the gut as we can. Cooking them makes a huge difference. Makes them easier to digest. It'll reduce any bloating or as much as possible while still delivering a lot of antioxidants. The colored pigments is what we're talking here. And in them, we're talking things like beta carotene and anthocyanins. And what they do is they act as antioxidants. And this is amazing because it's going to reduce any oxidative stress in your gut lining, which is amazing. Colored veg also feeds good bacteria, which is really important, particularly butyrate or butyrate producing strains, I should say, of your microbiome. And that helps heal your gut. I could probably go on for about another 20 benefits of cooked colored vegetables. You can almost not have enough in your diet. Like that's how much, like that's 100% on that. What I would say is start with at least a fist full 3 times a day, but genuinely have as much as you can, as often as you can, and you'll find that your overall health improves significantly. What I'd love to see people getting to is 2 fistfuls or 2 cups full for lunch and for dinner. And then I'd like a fistful for somewhere in the AM and somewhere as a mid-afternoon snack. If they can get there, they're having a lot of fibrous, good quality, cooked, colorful vegetables. It solves a lot of pain points in terms of not getting enough vitamins, minerals, fiber, polyphenols into your diet, which have immeasurable benefit. On that, you've got polyphenol rich foods. We're talking berries, which are really good, extra virgin olive oil, cacao, green tea, pomegranates, pretty good. Why polyphenol? It's a plant compound that acts as a natural anti-inflammatory. They are unbelievable. They are in colored veg. Take them. They also help shape your microbiome, which is important. They help feed the beneficial bacteria, which is really great. I want you to think of prebiotic fiber. What that does is it feeds your good bacteria. That's really important. We've got plenty of examples. We've got, things like leeks. We've got things like garlic. Jerusalem artichokes are really good. Green banana flour is great. Chicory root, they're all pretty good. These foods are high in inulin and fructooligosaccharides, or FOSs, they'll be stated as, which are fibers your body just can't digest, which is really important because your gut bacteria can. So all of these ferment and they produce short chain fatty acids. And one of them that's really important is butyrate. What does that do? It feeds your colon cells, it seals the gut lining, it reduces inflammation, and it improves overall immune tolerance. We were talking about the other one, which is gut lining repair foods. Bone broths, they're high in glycine, glutamine, and proline. These are all amino acids that help rebuild the gut and calm inflammation. Collagen powders are really amazing. They also support tissue regeneration and tight junction repair between those cells. Aloe vera juice is pretty good. It helps soothe inflammation and it enhances mucus production. Then you've got two others, slippery elm and marshmallow root. They just coat and protect the gut lining from further irritation. So if you're looking to reduce inflammation and improve gut health, I would take everything that we've talked about today. The last one, bitter foods or digestive bitters, really. You can get them in things like rocket, but lemon juice, apple cider vinegar work really well. I tout them a lot. With your apple cider vinegar, I would tout to actually obviously put it in some water, dilute it, and then rinse your mouth out with water once you've had it. It erodes enamel, which you don't just need to fix your gut, but destroy your teeth at the same time. That's kind of not really a win. What do? Well, they stimulate digestive enzymes, stomach acid, bile flow. All of these are critical for breaking your food down. So if your food's better broken down, it's going to absorb better and cause less irritant and inflammation in your gut. This helps reduce bloating, reflux, incomplete digestion, and it just encourages proper movement of food, which reduces fermentation in the gut at inappropriate times and your risk of SIBO. So it's pretty simple. Eat a bunch of good foods, cooked colored veg, polyphenol-rich foods, prebiotic fibers, omega-3s, bone broth and collagen, and then things that'll support your gut like aloe vera, slippery elm, marshmallow root, digestive bitters, and apple cider vinegar, and avoid as much gluten as you can, industrial seed oils, refined sugars, processed snacks, excess alcohol, and potentially conventional dairy. And you'll reduce a large amount of GI gut inflammation, which will then help with a lot of systemic inflammation. It'll reduce the amount of stress that your body's under, which will mean your HPA axis doesn't go into overdrive, which will calm your nervous system. And then from a genetics point of view, it will upregulate the pathways we do want, which is fat burning and muscle building and extra energy and mental cognition, and downregulate the pathways we don't want, which is like fat storage and muscle wastage. Is there any questions on today?
Not questions, but that's a lot of vegetables. I definitely don't get enough. Like for dinner last night, for example, I had a chickpea curry on a bed of rice, like that, no veggies at all. So, I mean, it was a healthy, decent meal to have, but I definitely don't get nearly as much as you're suggesting.
I'll give you a little cheat code. So, and I've learned it much better from my toddler who looks at vegetables like they're the devil, right? So I would make, when I made a curry for him or a bolognese or something like that, I will then just boil my sweet potato, my carrot, my pumpkin. I might put some beetroot in there. I'll put in some broccoli. I'll put in some leek, and I might put in some tomato. I just got to put whatever in there. And then all I do is then once it's cooked, I just use a stick blender and blend it into a sauce. And now I've got the essence of whatever my thing's going to be, whether it's for a pasta dish or whether it's for a curry or whether it is just for a soup. And I've got 5, 6, 7 vegetables already in there to get all the benefit of them. I try to keep them not completely blended into a soup because I want some form of digestible integrity in it. But that's the best way I have. And I know it's a bit of effort, but if you want to significantly increase your vegetable intake, that way, instead of it just being, a chickpea this with rice, it's actually like 7 or 8 things in one plus that over that bed, and you completely transformed the nutrient content of that meal.
Okay, great idea. Thanks.
I'll say, having just gone through the protocol with Anthony, the interesting thing I found, because I had to increase to calorie count and I had to increase my vegetable intake to be, I think it was at one point, it was only 50% of my calories. It sounds like a lot, but I mean, I had to reduce my calories. The hardest thing I found was vegetables aren't very calorie dense. So other than sweet potato, you eat a whole capsicum, couple of tomatoes, a head of lettuce, 3 cucumbers, a handful of mushrooms, you're barely touching like 400 calories. And it's just like, how the hell am I going to eat all this food? So, I mean, that was the hard part for me, was trying to find, I guess, a mixture of vegetables that are going to give me the nutrients, but also the amount of calories, so that I'm not, then trying to top it up with, anything that's not optimal. But yeah, I guess, like you were saying to Jeffrey, it's probably not difficult for something like a curry to throw in a heap of vegetables, because it more just adds, I guess, body more than calories. So that kind of helps twofold, in that if you are trying to reduce calories, one, you don't have to eat as big a volume because you've got all the filler with the vegetables, and two, you're getting better mineral intake from adding, fresh vegetables as opposed to the less optimal foods.
Yeah, I think if you just by natural default, if you said I'm going to have 50% of my plate vegetables, you would lose genuine weight just because they are so low in calories, which is amazing. But like the calories that probably have the most, it's like a potato and a sweet potato, reasonably high. Parsnips, taro, green peas are actually higher than you'd think because they got so much protein in them. They're probably your go-tos, right? But you have to eat quite a large quantity of them. Normally, it'll just be paired with your carbohydrate source, which significantly balances out. And then if it is somebody who's vegetarian, it's just about getting in quality fats. And fats are, as much as I love them and they're so good for you, they're overeaten like you wouldn't believe just because of how dense they are, which, not that I'm a fan of a low-fat diet, but I don't mind going lowish at the start, not just so people become aware of just how much calories are in their fat, and they're just in every meal for every person. But yeah, really, really good points there. If you eat enough vegetables, the fiber in them will keep you full for a pretty long time too. thank you very much for joining me, who's on the call today. I really appreciate it. Hope you took something out of today.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, sir.
Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all next week. If you'd love some support, check out my Instagram at eSammyRoberts. Until next time, keep living better.